Good evening, I'm Andrew Chang, and welcome to a special hour-long broadcast dedicated and devoted entirely to the wildfire crisis in British Columbia. More than 14,000 people have had to flee those wildfires. There are more than 200 of them burning right across the province, and crews are beginning to get tired. They're completely at the whim of Mother Nature. So let's get right to it. CBC Vancouver News at 6 starts right now. With emotions running high and exhaustion starting to set in, all eyes were on the interior today as crews work night and day to contain hundreds of intense wildfires burning across BC. Now, as I mentioned, so far, at least 14,000 people have been told to pack up and to flee to neighboring communities. Fire crews are doing what they can to turn the tides, but in a way, they are fighting Mother Nature itself, and on multiple fronts. There are more than 200 wildfires burning in BC right now, many of which sparked in just the last 24 hours. Now, looking at this fire map, the threat spans some 500 kilometers, but the most dangerous fires, those closest to where people live, are in the interior and Caribou regions. And that is where we find the CBC's Briar Stewart on the road to 100 Mile House, where winds suddenly shifted and residents had to evacuate last night. So Briar, what's it like where you are?
Well, it is windy again tonight, Andrew. Where I am, I'm on Highway 97, and this is basically as far north as you can go because the RCMP have set up a roadblock here. There's another road that leads into this community. There's a roadblock there as well. I've been here throughout most of the day, and we've seen a fair number of vehicles pull up. A lot of residents get out of their vehicles to see if they can go through. Police, of course, tell them no. The only ones that are allowed through are crews working to support some of the firefighters. Now, we understand there are about 120 firefighters on site here fighting the fire. There's also 14 helicopters, and the firefighters are staying at a fire camp that we visited today, just a short distance from here. And we understand, obviously, over the next few days that reinforcements are being brought in from out of province. So it's very likely that some of them will end up here as well, because this fire, over 5,000 hectares, is a major concern.
And Briar, do all those people on the front lines feel like they're making progress here?
Well, it's been a very stressful time. I spoke to one of the crew members who was helping to make a fire guard last night. Now, it was so windy that it really just fueled the fire. It whipped it up and it started spreading rapidly. And they had built a fire guard. And at one point, the fire had actually jumped the guard. And so these crews that were normally operating dozers and heavy equipment, they actually had to start using a water truck to put out the flames. And when I talked to the one crew member today, his name is Steve Tracera, he talked about just how important it was for him to try to save his community. He talked about how this is a forestry town, there are 2 mills here, and just how much that means to everyone. Here's some of what he had to say.
Town we're saving, we've logged here for 40 years, our whole family, McNeil family, and it's our livelihood. You know, if the mills get burnt down, I think this town is pretty much a ghost town. You know, it's our bread and butter around here. So that's why everyone's trying to work so hard to save this place. And it's a beautiful place, it's a beautiful town, you know.
Gosh, so Briar, one more question for you. I mean, as someone who has had covered extensively the absolutely devastating wildfires in Fort McMurray in Alberta last year, how does this compare?
Well, there are a lot of similarities and differences. I mean, it's a state of an emergency. It's a disaster. We're hearing about homes being destroyed. But I think some of the biggest differences is kind of the scale and the geography. I mean, for one, you have to remember that when the Fort McMurray fire happened, it swept into town very suddenly, and 80,000 people, were evacuated in a number of hours. In this instance, you're seeing a lot of evacuations in different areas of the province. So it's more widespread, but there are fewer people. still just over 14,000. And in terms of the loss and the scale of the damage, we do know that some homes have been destroyed, but there's not really a clear picture province-wide at this point. That's because it's still an emergency. Crews are still fighting the fires, and there's so much heavy smoke that it's hard for them to kind of get in there and to get an accurate sense of what's going on the ground. And we'll get that in the days ahead as they make progress with the fire and they're able to kind of give an estimate of the damage.
Okay, thanks very much, Brian. Now, 100 Mile House is just one of about a dozen communities where fire is bearing down. These interface fires, the ones threatening both buildings and forests, continue to burn in the areas around Williams Lake, Princeton, Little Fort, and Ashcroft, as well as along the Kluskis Forest Service Road and near Grizzly Lake. And what's become painfully clear is that these communities are very much at the whim of the wind. Big shifts change everything. Amy Bell is tracking that for us. And so, Amy, what are you seeing out there?
Well, today we did have some fairly significant winds whip up around Princeton, unfortunately. At last check, the largest gust was about 35 kilometers an hour, which certainly is more than enough to have a severe impact. We did see a few very, very light showers in sort of the Prince George area, but as you make your way down into the interior, really nothing of any significance. And these dots that you can see coming up over the last few hours, in the last 12 hours, we've seen a lot of dry lightning strikes in the Kootenay area. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Thankfully, taking a look ahead at the wind, we will see it gusting once again in the Williams Lake area. We could also see it picking up again tomorrow around the Princeton. But long term, I think those winds will actually settle down a little bit at this stage, fairly early in the game, but definitely nothing of significance for any of those areas in terms of precipitation. Just a slight chance tonight in Williams Lake and then again on Wednesday. After that, taking a look ahead across the province, other than the north coast and the further north of the province, we're looking at least 10 days to, I say, possibly 2 weeks without any precipitation. No matter which model we've been looking at today, we just cannot find a way that any of these forces would sort of join and have an outcome of there being some precipitation. So certainly not looking good. As you can see, it's a little deceiving though. Over the next 24 hours, these cells incredibly light as they make their way sort of towards Alberta, and we are going to see just a very slight chance. Most of it, as I mentioned, up in the north coast and the very northern half of the province, but that as we get down south where that situation is so dire, we just do not have that impact. So some of these cells certainly are so light they really won't even make it to the ground. By the time they do, they've evaporated already. A lot of this is not just cloud cover but intense smoke cover. So we're seeing that smoke dropping down in the interior. It will make its way towards, I believe, the Kootenays over the next couple of days. And again, we're going to have that increased chance of lightning, dry lightning in the Kootenay area. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well.
That can be so dangerous when those lightning strikes.
Incredibly dangerous.
Thanks a lot, Amy.
You're welcome.
Well, as the raging wildfires force thousands of British Columbians from their homes, officials have opened centres to provide evacuees with support, food, water, medicine, and places to sleep. At the Kamloops Centre, open to accommodate residents of Cache Creek and the area around Ashcroft. But over the weekend, its emergency response system was pushed to full capacity. So when a wildfire threatened 100 Mile House, residents, they were told not to make the trip, the 2-hour trip to Kamloops, but rather to drive 5 hours north to Prince George instead. And still others opt to improvise. Now, in Kamloops, a Walmart parking lot has become something of an impromptu campground. Belle Puri spoke to the evacuees there.
In a shared situation of distress, it's easy to become fast friends.
Camp at Walmart.
We're camping at Walmart.
A big box store parking lot seemed the most convenient place to call it a night at 10 o'clock after forest fires pushed them out of their homes.
It's been the worst disaster I've ever seen. They have not notified people. They're not letting them know what's going on. We phone and get information. We weren't even told to evacuate. I had to phone my MLA's office to find out we were evacuated.
It's the second time in 4 days Rob and Cheryl Anderson have been forced to find safer ground. First, they fled their home in 108 Mile.
We had already been kicked out of 108 and kicked out of our homes and said, get out, because the fire was coming right up.
Then heavy smoke forced them and others out of Forest Grove.
We managed to get out of the Grove and got into 100 Mile House just as they were evacuating 100 Mile House, and then we had to run from there too.
In that location, we're blocked in. right? Then you can't get out the back way. They were told you can't go the back way to stay in Forest Grove. So where do you go when there's a fire on one side and they're not letting you out the other side?
Forest Grove is actually under an evacuation alert, but residents say the situation is far too volatile to wait for an order to go. Accommodations in Kamloops are already full, with people escaping forest fires in Cache Creek and Ashcroft. Finding a place is tough for those people who are arriving now. But what these parking lot campers want to talk about is the generosity of others. It's the help of strangers that keeps them positive when they have no idea if their homes are still standing.
We went into Walmart to pick up some things to carry on with, and they asked us to contribute to the fire relief fund, and I said we're one of the victims, and the lady behind us offered to pay our bill. Yeah.
When we were trying to get out of 100 Mile House, we topped up our vehicles and we needed a bottle of propane. The Super Save gas. The gentleman in there, I paid him for a bottle of propane when we went outside to get it, and he unlocked it. He handed one to my husband, and he took another brand new full bottle out and handed it to me at no charge.
One night in a parking lot is enough. Next stop is a campsite about an hour away in Sicamous to rest and regroup and wait for news about what's happening at home. Belle Puri, CBC News, Kamloops.
Heading north now to Prince George, where residents of 100 Mile House arrived after the entire town was ordered to evacuate yesterday evening.
Passed by like probably 4 different mountains that were all caught up on flames. Everybody's like, stressed out and stuff, thinking that our 100 miles is going to burn down.
It was a long night for many of those evacuees. Some of them spent up to 10 hours on the road. So when they finally arrived in Prince George, the evacuation center was a welcome sight. Now, one of the families at the evacuation center is Andrea Christensen and her son Landon. Their home is in Williams Lake, and with the wildfires closing in, they decided it was just too dangerous to stay. So last night, along with Andrea's parents, they made the 5-hour drive to safety in Prince George. And they join us right now from the evacuation center. Andrea and Landon, thanks for linking up with us. We appreciate that. How is the family doing?
We're doing much better now that we're in a place with less smoke. It's very helpful here. Everybody's been amazing, so it's nice to be somewhere safe.
And Landon, all of this must have happened so quickly for you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm just trying to imagine that it's another vacation, just making the best of it.
Well, it's an incredible outlook to have. So walk me through exactly what happened, because you guys had a full car when you left, right?
Yes. From what day? We got home Friday from a little holiday in Bellacoola, and fires were starting around Williams Lake. So a friend said, fill up your car and make sure you can leave if it gets worse.
And what were you able to take with you?
We took food, a cooler full of food, some blankets, a tent, money, passports, and that's about all we could fit, and our 3 cats and a rabbit.
Okay, so it really was a full car. And if I could ask the flip side to that question, what did you have to leave behind?
Well, we had to leave a feral cat. We had to leave family that are in different parts of BC. Our sister and brother-in-law made it yesterday, or this morning, so we're really happy about that. They're here now too. Okay, so that's good. So you've been in contact with your various family members who've all had to go in different directions. Do you know if your home is still okay? Yes, we're pretty sure it is, and we just found out my brother's is. It was rumored that his burned down, but his is good. Okay, so that's also a bit of good news. So Landon, you guys are at the evacuation center. What is it like there?
It's packed, very packed. Lots of families are here from 100 Mile, Williams Lake.
Goodale.
Yeah.
I think they even had to come from Cache Creek.
It's also pretty organized too, so that's good. Okay,
so have you guys been able to get everything you need?
They were very generous. We got our cats and rabbit in a nice, safe place. A wonderful lady is kind of managing that. There's probably 100 animals there. We've got money for Save on Foods. They gave us that. We got the last room at the Treasure Cove, so we were very lucky about that. My dad's 87 years old, so we just wanted him to be safe and comfortable.
Right. So it's all good news. Andrea, you must be tired.
You just keep going. You just want to make sure everybody's safe and helped.
So, last question for you. Do you know how much longer you're going to have to be there in Prince George?
Well, I know the volunteers have said that they're here from 7 to 21 days, so I don't know if they'll ship us back earlier if they can, or send us back, or on our way if we can.
Okay.
Right now, we're staying for 5 days for sure.
Okay, wow. So it's a long journey ahead. Andrea and Landon, thanks so much for linking up with us.
Thank you so much.
Now, let's take you about an hour south of 100 Mile House to the area around Ashcroft. Just days ago, a group of ranchers were tending to a prosperous herd. Now, what's left? Scorched foundations. And the group risked everything to save what they could of their livestock and their livelihoods. Anita Bath brings us this story of their escape.
Just devastating. You know, this is what you do, and it's gone.
At just 25 years old, Rob Donaldson's young career as a rancher has taken a turn for the worst. Wildfire ripped through his property in the Boston Flats area.
This main part here was the milk cow barn, and now it's long gone.
Part of a multi-million-dollar operation, this barn was only 2 years old. Hard to imagine this is what it looked like before. One of the biggest businesses to be hit by wildfire. It held 300 dairy cattle, many of them calves. It only took 20 minutes from when they saw the fire down there on the horizon until the flames reached this barn, cattle still inside. As the barn burned, family, friends, and even strangers risked their lives to save the animals.
There was about 30 of us pulling them by their legs, heads and tails. At the very end, there was a cow stuck, and everyone was running. I went and grabbed one of my bobcats, and I blew through a wall, and I went and scooped the cow up and drove through a set of flames and got out, and then we dumped the cow, and she got up and she ran.
Incredibly, they managed to save all of the cows except 4.
We're real cow people, so for us to lose even 1 or 2 cows, it's just, it's like losing a family member. Pretty amazing anyways that we didn't lose more.
The others are being treated for burns and smoke inhalation. Rescuers scrambled for 55 hours until the last cow was moved to safety. All that time not worrying about their own welfare.
We had no water or food for ourselves to drink. And at one point we were all running kind of for our lives from this structure. The whole roof and one big piece went boom.
Bradner Farms isn't the only one hard hit in the area. Just across the street is Boston Flats Trailer Park, where on Friday more than 30 homes went up in flames. Today, all that's left are the shells of cars and mobile homes. Only 2 trailers still standing, although not left unscathed.
Anyways, we're going to rebuild, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can start tearing this down and start over.
Tough to picture when everything here is lost. Anita Bath, CBC News, Ashcroft.
Now, as the wildfire situation continues to unfold, we are hearing from members of the provincial government. Yesterday, Premier Christy Clark announced $100 million in relief funding for affected communities and their residents. And today, BC Emergency Management Minister Todd Stone spoke to the CBC with a reminder to British Columbians affected by the fires.
Listen, for folks out there, it is absolutely imperative that you follow the advice, well, not the advice, the direction of emergency personnel. These are trained professionals who do this for a living. They know what they're doing. So far, we've had very good compliance with people generally doing what they're told with respect to these evacuations. But it is a very difficult situation, obviously, for families leaving their homes and all of their possessions behind can be very, very traumatic.
Now, we also heard from the federal government today as Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale laid out their plan for helping with relief efforts here in BC.
The federal government was officially and formally asked for assistance yesterday afternoon. We responded immediately with a very strong and resounding yes. The management of this situation is in the hands of the province of British Columbia. They are the lead agency. The Government of Canada is there to assist. We have responded so far to every request we have received, and we will continue to do that.
There are a few things that the federal government has agreed to provide. Among them is access to the National Emergency Supplies stockpile, so things like blankets and cots for evacuation centers. They're also supplying vehicles, military aircraft to help transport firefighters and other personnel, and trucks also for law enforcement officers on the ground. On top of that, they're going to be providing logistical support to keep track of evacuees, for example, where they've come from and where they end up. Now, if you're wondering what you can do to help out, we've got you covered. Coming up after the break, I'll be joined by a representative from the Red Cross. She'll tell us what evacuees need most and how you can get it to them. The Boston Flats trailer park west of Kamloops was razed by the Ashcroft wildfire on Friday. Yesterday, our Anita Bath spoke to one evacuee from the community who lost her trailer, all her worldly possessions, as well as any chance of recovering the money she put into her home. Susan Smith did not have home insurance. Here's her account of the weekend that turned her life upside down.
Saw the fire on the res, and we didn't think anything of it. So we went and got some groceries and picked up the prescriptions, and we went home. And when we got home, the police were waiting for us and waiting for everybody in the trailer park, and they said, you got to get out of here. So we went and picked up our cat and threw her in the car, and we left and we went to Cache Creek Community Center, and I'll bet you within an hour, as a matter of fact, we were on our way to Kamloops because the fire was coming into Cache Creek too, and they wanted an evacuation, everybody from there.
So you left your home 2 days ago. Do you know what you're going back to?
Yes. We're going back to nothing.
How did you find out that your home is gone?
People posted it and sent me pictures.
Clearly impossible for anyone to know what you're going through.
We lost everything, and so did everybody else in the trailer park. Like, all the trailers and everything are just laying flat. We probably won't even be able to save a picture. That's, to me, the most precious thing I could have ever lost is the pictures. Because, you know, you look at a picture and it brings back a wonderful, warm memory of a certain time. Like, I had pictures of my dad. He lied about his age to get into the Army, 16 years old, you know, in his Army uniform, and then again at 18, you know, and his discharge papers and that, like, that stuff that's irreplaceable. My husband was an Ontario Provincial Police officer, and we had all of his badges that he had collected from everybody all over the world, and his original certifications, you know, that all of that's gone, you know, and that's stuff that really meant a lot to us.
Where do you go from here?
We don't know. We just thank God for Chantel letting us stay here, having the freedom and the run of her home. We're going to try to go back to Ashcroft and see if maybe we can get an apartment. That's the best we can do, because that's home now.
Now, that's just one evacuee. But remember, 14,000 others have been forced from their homes, many without time to grab so much as a change of clothes. Now, as the evacuees pack into emergency housing, the province has stepped in with $100 million in fire relief funding. That will be distributed by the Red Cross, and it'll include a $600 grant for each evacuee who has lost property to the fires. Now, supporting that effort to get people the help they need, the Canadian Red Cross. And we have joining us right now Kimberly Nemrava, who's the VP for the Canadian Red Cross, the British Columbia and the Yukon section of it. And so, Kimberly, can you walk me through first what help the Red Cross has been able to offer some of those evacuees in BC?
Well, we work very closely with the local authorities who are in charge of the operation, and of course with the provincial declaration of emergency, the province is coordinating all the aid. So we work very closely with them. We've moved cots and blankets into place. In some communities, our volunteers are operating some of the reception centers, and we are registering evacuees from across the province to set up to provide them with financial assistance.
And do you have everything that you need to do the job well? I mean, are you able to keep pace?
Well, this is certainly a challenging operation. I think with the movement of evacuees, and I think first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the stress it places on the family, and our hearts and thoughts go out with them. We are ramping up very quickly, and as always happens at the beginning of an operation, you are scrambling to make sure that you're putting the people and the systems in place to support them.
Now, we mentioned some of the financial assistance that's due for some of these evacuees that the BC government has promised through the Red Cross, $600 for families and for individuals. How exactly do people get that money? Because we've had a number of questions come in over the day about what the process is to actually get the $600.
Now, what people should do is they should register with Red Cross. I will say there is a backlog for registration, but they need to call the Red Cross registration line. And there is a wait there, but do hang in there. And we are putting more operators on to take that call and register with us. And then there will be a process unfolding in the next few days to get back to the evacuees with how to get that money.
Because is that going to be a bank transfer? Do you cut them a check? Do you give them cash? I mean, how does that work?
We do a couple of ways. One is a bank transfer, but not all evacuees can receive money that way. And so we also have a system where we mobilize teams in the community to be able to provide cash cards. So we have to get both of those modalities in place to be able to provide this assistance.
Okay, now on the donation front, so in terms of all those people out there who want to help, one other thing that we heard today was that a number of people were having trouble getting through, that there was a bit of a backlog just in donating to the Red Cross. Is that still the case, or are there backlog issues there?
We've got the website, the redcross.ca. If they go to the website to donate, they should be able to do it there. And there's also a donation line at 1-800-418-1111. And I haven't heard many reports of a backlog there, but I'll certainly look into it.
Okay, and in terms of, last question for you, in terms of what you need, I mean, money is always first and foremost. Do you need supplies, goods, or even volunteer hours? Do you need people to come there in person and give their time?
Well, what we are doing right now is mobilizing our volunteer network, the people who have registered with Red Cross as volunteers and are trained with Red Cross. We may, in the days and weeks to come, put out a call for volunteers. That would be in coordination with the government and the local authorities. Really, the big support is that if people are in affected communities or nearby affected communities, there's a lot of things that you can do neighbor to neighbor, using your community networks just to reach out to your neighbors who are affected, or linking with your local authority to maybe support a family or support at their reception centers. But it's in terms of assistance to the Red Cross right now, the financial donations are the best way to help us.
Okay. Kimberly Nemrava with the Canadian Red Cross, thanks for touching base with us.
Thank you so much.
Coming up after the break, we are going to take you to Cache Creek, where 30 homes have been destroyed by fire, and an evacuation order remains in effect. But some residents are refusing to leave. We'll hear from one after the break.
It's been the worst disaster I've ever seen. They have not notified people.
As crews wrestle to contain wildfires across central BC, more residents are being urged to flee for shelter. About an hour ago, Okanagan fire officials expanded an evacuation order for 49 homes north of Princeton. That area was one of the first to see sparks fly on Friday. And it comes on top of evacuation orders already in effect in a number of other places, like the area around Ashcroft and Cache Creek. Now, I should say, not everybody decided to leave Cache Creek. Joining us right now, Mark Jewell. He's one of about 10 people, I understand, who've decided to defy the evacuation order. Mark, can you explain for us why?
There's several reasons. One is to protect my property. I've worked for over 40 years to mask the things I have. I know it sounds a little shallow, but that's the way I feel. And I've got my family out Friday night. And we've also had problems here with theft and break-ins and whatnot. And that's another big reason that myself and my neighbor Wayne here decided to stay.
And if the wildfire bears down on you, though, I mean, what are you going to do?
It's actually pretty good today. There's no imminent danger for us down here in Cache Creek. We do have a contingency plan to get out if we have to.
Can you describe for me a bit sort of your surroundings and what you're seeing there? Can you see the fire from where you are? How is the smoke? Those sorts of things.
All I'm seeing is the hills around here that have already been burned out. There's a few little smokers, and you can probably hear the choppers in the background and putting out little spot fires and whatnot. But I don't know what's outside this big perimeter here, how bad it is or anything.
Do you think you're taking a big risk by staying back?
Absolutely not. No.
How can you be so sure? I mean, you just think of the everything that we've heard from fire officials, from meteorologists about the unpredictability of the wind. I mean, this thing could shift very quickly.
Where I am right now, there's just about zero chance that the flames could ever get over here. But up in the hills and the mountains, oh, for sure. You know, I understand I did take a bit of a risk, but I feel like my home and my neighbors' homes and stuff are worth the risk.
Do you have people who are checking in on you? Because I suspect that the police and firefighters, they must have paid a visit to you probably multiple times to say, hey, maybe you should leave.
No, they've never said that. We were driving around last night up and checking on people's places, and they asked me to park my car and not drive around for obvious reasons, and I totally understand. But it did give us the opportunity to go up and check on these places, and they're all absolutely fine.
Okay, last question for you. Do you have an escape plan?
Well, yeah, jump in my car and get out of Dodge here. There's several avenues I can take, but I want to convey it's nowhere near that kind of conditions here right now.
Okay, well, I hope you stay safe, and I hope nothing bad happens. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you taking that time.
Thank you.
Now, if I could, I want to bring into the conversation Kevin Krupnick, who is the Chief Fire Information Officer with the BC Wildfire Service. And Kevin, you were listening in to my conversation with Mark. What do you think of the fact that he's decided to stay back?
Well, Andrew, I mean, he's made a personal choice. Certainly, it's not one that I agree with. Certainly not what we're encouraging people to do out there. He's made a few points as to why he's staying behind. And again, I understand why people want to stay behind to protect their property that they've worked so hard for. That's all human nature. But I think what we've seen over the last 72 hours shows just how violent and how erratic these fires can be. And it's not just a matter of where you are at any given time. We've seen a lot of issues where access routes in and out of communities have been compromised. Fires can create spot fires essentially well ahead of where you might actually see the flame front. So there can be dangers lingering there that might not necessarily be apparent to most people. And you pose an interesting question to him about were people stopping in, emergency officials stopping in to check on them. That usually is the case, which ties up our resources when we're trying to respond to the fire, when we're trying to keep the area secure. And potentially, I mean, if the fire does blow back where he is, first responders might put their lives on the line to go back and make sure that they're getting out of there safely. So certainly it's troubling to hear that. There have been a few examples of that across the province over the last few days. In general, most people do heed those evacuation orders, and certainly we're glad they do, because it does create quite a disruption when people remain behind in an evacuation area.
And so just for the sake of clarity, if I were to ask you, bottom line, is Cache Creek anywhere near as safe as he says it is? You would say what?
I haven't been out there myself, Andrew. I can tell you that, it's certainly still an active fire zone. Something to keep in mind, too, there might not necessarily be active flame there, but after a fire's gone through, it can leave a whole bunch of hazards in its wake, down power lines, things like that. We keep people out of there for a reason. The gentleman's made his decision, and fair enough, but certainly it's not what we're hoping to see, given the amount of evacuation orders that are in place, and given the fact that we could be seeing more in the future, given the situation we're in.
So let's talk about the broader situation then, if we could. I wanted to ask you about firefighters themselves, because you've been in touch with them. How are they holding up?
I think the crews are in good spirits given the situation that they're facing. Having said that, though, this is a busy time. There's a lot of people out there operating on very little rest, and that's part of why we're bringing in additional resources so that we can rest some of our own people who have been working, day and night since this started on Friday. It's important to remember too, we're only a week and a half into July. There's still a long summer ahead of us here, and if we keep seeing the weather that we've been getting, we could be into a pretty escalated situation for another month or so, if not more here. So we need to pace ourselves.
And last question for you: where is the danger highest right now? The areas of greatest concern?
Yeah, certainly, and I don't want to minimize the fact that the entire province is experiencing pretty significant fires right now, but certainly the Caribou region and the southern interior, Thompson, Okanagan regions, Similkameen, are seeing the most high hazard, and of course where a lot of these major interface fires are burning. That's the concern right now, is those areas, but again, it's early into the summer. The situation could continue to.
Okay, Chief Fire Information Officer with the BC Wildfire Service, Kevin Krupnick. I know you're a busy guy, so thanks for talking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's turn now to Amy Bell, who's keeping a close eye on the weather conditions right across British Columbia. And of course, we know those wildfires very much at the mercy of the weather. So,
incredibly so. And it can change so quickly. We've actually seen things sort of calming down in the last couple of hours. By no means does that mean anybody is out of the woods, but we are enjoying things just leveling off a little bit. We are, of course, still seeing risk of some lightning, dry lightning specifically, in that very sort of southeast corner of the province. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that over the next couple of days for the Kootenays. We did see earlier just a few very light showers around the Prince George area. Unfortunately, not really where we need it. We're still staying incredibly dry as you come down through the interior, through the Caribou and the interior. Over the next couple of days, we do still have a very slight chance of some showers, I would say tonight around Kamloops, and then again Wednesday. However, once we get past Wednesday, throughout the province, we are looking at an incredibly long-range forecast that is very dry. No matter which models we're sort of pushing together to see if there's any possibility. It just doesn't seem to be the case for at least 10 days, perhaps even longer. So we'll be constantly updating that. That, of course, is for the southern half of the province. We've got plenty of precipitation for the northern half, which is not at all where we need it, and there's no way that it's going to be making its way that far down. As you can see from sort of the screen, that is the chance of these cells. But once again, they'll be very quick, they'll be very light, and they will dissipate long before they get into that fire area. We're also going to see those winds ramping up again tonight around the Princeton area. In fact, last check, we were looking at gusts up to just over 50 kilometers an hour. They will ease off overnight, but we're going to see that pattern again tomorrow, where they do ramp up throughout the afternoon. We are also going to see things getting a little bit windier as you're making your way further into the Caribou. Fire, of course, with the smoke, that is a huge issue. We've got very poor air quality, especially around the Okanagan-Thompson area. So do keep that in mind if you have any sort of health issues. That is something to watch for. And again, we're going to see that smoke sort of shifting as it makes its way from the southern half, making its way sort of northwest. So we'll keep an eye on that and track it throughout the province. But yes, not great news. Mother Nature certainly not really cooperating with us at this point, although I suppose it could be worse. Right now, we're not dealing with anything too significant in terms of rainfall. We will see things, a mix of sun and cloud over on the island. Nanaimo looking good tomorrow, a high of 23, and this is all very average. Unfortunately, I almost feel bad for us here on the South Coast. We're dealing with very typical conditions for this time of year. We will see some rain in Prince Rupert, as I mentioned. Dease Lake seeing some shower activity. We do have that unsettled air in the Cranbrook area. Kamloops, 30 degrees, and that is one of the lower temperatures you're going to see over the next couple of days. In fact, we are going to continue to see those temperatures wrapping up. For us, we're still just sitting in the low to mid-20s. It's later in the week that, again, we'll start to see things a little bit warmer. But yes, as we head through the week across the province, looking much warmer into the high 30s for the Kootenays, for the Caribou, in fact. But yeah, for us here, we're looking at sunshine. By midweek, we're really clearing up, and we're seeing those temperatures into the mid-20s again. But again, that's a very dry forecast.
Yeah, no rain in sight.
None.
That's really something. Thanks a lot, Amy.
You're welcome.
Now, with wildfire season ramping up, researchers are trying to figure out how to better help people requiring emergency assistance. They analyzed more than 70,000 tweets sent out during the Fort McMurray fire and looked at whether existing smartphone apps do enough to help. And the results might surprise you. Rafi Boudjikanian explains.
Got to kick it with your gentle foot.
Susanna Newhart helps renovate and build homes for a living, but the landscape contractor is also familiar with destruction. In 2009, she was forced from her own home during mandatory evacuations in West Kelowna, BC, and remembers the kindness of the community.
It was overwhelmingly positive. I was really grateful for all the volunteers and all the people that stepped up.
So, when disaster struck Fort McMurray last year, Newhart was ready to help. She took to Twitter to inform herself and also advertise what people needed. They need diapers, baby wipes, new toiletries, new socks and underwear, she wrote, naming a drop-off point. Hers were among thousands of tweets sent out during the fire, some not offering help but asking for it, like this one. Please retweet. Anyone still in Thickwood area of the Fort McMurray fire? Need a couple of dogs evacuated. Months later, this team of researchers analyzed more than 70,000 tweets related to Fort McMurray and discovered many of them were asking for the kind of assistance the biggest emergency apps didn't provide.
Looking backwards, everything looks obvious and say, well, of course, yeah, that's needed, but there is a kind of limitation thinking within, your scenario and not going outside the box. Looking at, as simple things, where is the next food store or how close is the actual fire.
Or these, request ambulance at a tap, find a medical center, find nearest gas station.
Among the top 10 features that people found them essential for the emergency situation like Fort Mac, none of them are available in any of the currently existing emergency app across US, Canada and Australia.
Newhart remembers what it was like when she badly needed information herself.
First day or two, actually, you're kind of left wondering what's going on, who do I talk to, where do I go?
Those dealing with wildfires now in BC will have to keep relying on the more basic information in current emergency apps. The researchers say they're getting the attention of app manufacturers and some public bodies like the province of Alberta and even the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, but talks to use their material remain preliminary. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Calgary.
Our home can be replaced.
Yeah, that's it's not something that I can worry about right now. I have absolutely no control.
Coming up after the break, we're going to take you back to Kamloops, where thousands of wildfire evacuees are desperate for news about their homes. We'll also remind you how you can pitch in and help. Stay with us. More than 200 fires are now burning in our province, and together they've forced about 14,000 people to flee their homes. The provincial and federal governments are committing millions of dollars in help. And as Carolyn Dunn reports, further assistance is coming from all over.
The trailer was spray painted with love, filled with water, baby products, and food, donated and delivered by those who endured the devastating Fort McMurray fires.
It happened to us last year, so we just want to pay it forward and help out. And Canada helped us out last year, so we're doing what we can to help out.
There are no people in the country more in need than those in the interior of BC. The fires that are raging around them were started by lightning strikes and human activity. Now they're igniting quicker than firefighters can get them under control. Hot weather and winds are fueling the fires, which number in the hundreds now. Among the thousands of evacuees, the Marquess Wild family, including 14-year-old Nate. They had just enough time to grab medication from their home in Cache Creek. With no place to stay, they're more worried about health than home.
My son has reactive airway disease and asthma, as do I, and I'm having lots of nosebleeds and stuff, so even just being here is a hazard for us.
There is help for the evacuees, even the four-legged variety. Diane and Sean Dolmage managed to escape 103 Mile with their 4-month-old puppies, Boris and Natasha.
What's your worry and concern?
Well, they're basically for life. You know, I mean, these firemen that are there doing their jobs, I'm hoping that they're in good condition when the whole thing is done.
Our home can be replaced.
Yeah, that's it's not something that I can worry about right now. I have absolutely no controls.
There is help en route to battle the blazes. About 300 firefighters from across the country are arriving to join the 1,000 already on the front lines. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Kamloops, British Columbia.
Now, if you've been watching some of these stories of struggle over the course of tonight's program and you're wondering, what can I do to help? We have a few tips for you, courtesy of the Red Cross, to help you figure out how you can best do that. Now, financial donations are the obvious answer. You can text FIRES in all caps to 45678 to donate $10 to the Canadian Red Cross BC fire relief effort. In terms of goods, you might think to send clothing or toys for evacuated residents, but the Red Cross says hold off there. They don't have the room to store any of that or the manpower to sort through it. Before donating goods, they recommend talking to a local emergency resource center in a region where you'd like to help, and they'll tell you where their need is. But again, they say money is the most ideal way to help out. Thanks for joining us here on the program. That does it for us. I will say a great resource if you have family members, loved ones in communities affected, our website, cbc.ca/BC. It has the latest information, as well as alerts and advisories from Environment Canada, road closures from Drive BC, the works. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great evening. Take care.